fascinating moment. U.S. envoy for climate change, John Kerry, appeared on French television, presumably to talk about some of his climate initiatives. But he was asked about the war in Ukraine, about whether Putin was a war criminal, and also about war crimes trials, when the French host decided to hit back a little bit and say, yeah, but what about Bush and Iraq and the war that you voted for? Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Unfortunately, it was dubbed, so we only have subtitles in terms of what was asked here. And so he says, well, he didn't know that that was a lie, referencing
you sure
to
about
Bush.
that?
You know, the evidence that was produced, people couldn't have known that there was a lie. So no, again, I think they're stretching something that's not a constructive thing whenever he's asked there about Iraq. It's not constructive. He says, sir, I am not going to re-debate the Iraq war here right now. We spent a lot of time doing that previously. I was opposed to going in. Not true. I thought it was the wrong thing to do. Not true. But we gave the president the power, regrettably. The Congress, based on a lie. And when we knew it was a lie, people stood up and did the right thing. Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Many years later.
Did you set up and do the right thing? That's interesting. Interesting enough, I believe Kerry does speak fluent French in terms of that debate and in terms of that appearance. But I think that is a perfect view of the hypocrisy of the way that we look and that way we talk whenever we conduct ourselves in international affairs. And that's not China. That's not India. That's not, you know, an adversary or somewhere that's non-Western. That's France. That's a country which obviously rejected going into Iraq with us, but that's a country which is in NATO, ostensibly our ally, right? These are the people who should see things somewhat our way. But even our version of events, though, whenever it comes to the way that we want to cast certain events, well, certainly doesn't go over that way with the rest of the world. And that is why I increasingly believe that the great divide right now is between like Western liberal thinking in terms of NATO, international world order, and all that stuff, and then every other country on earth. And increasingly, the rest of the world is trending much more towards realism, towards multipolarity, towards a very traditional conduct of relations between states, whereas we're still stuck in like 1991, where we think it's the unipolar moment, and we haven't invaded Iraq and had the devastation of Afghanistan and been humiliated, and, you know, and had all this other stuff.
I think we still have some kind of moral authority. I mean, we really squandered that. Iraq, listen, it's the least devastating part of Iraq, but you know, any idea that we have moral authority on, you know, Russia invading Ukraine was really destroyed by that moment. And Bush and Cheney, obviously the #1 culprits, and all of their architects and enablers, et cetera. But it was truly a bipartisan effort. I mean, Joe Biden was really central. John Kerry, he's such a mess. I don't even know how he could really say, like, I opposed it and I thought it was wrong at the time. He voted for the authorization, and he was still, I looked it up, he was still defending it even when he was running for president. So, like, it's such an attempt to rewrite history that, like, oh, you had it right all the way along. And then he also offers in the same breath the cope that you hear from Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and other Democrats in particular, but across the board, who voted to justify what ended up being totally unjustifiable, which is that, like, well, we couldn't have known. We couldn't have known it was a lie at the time. Oh, really? Because there were people who were out there who were raising a hell of a lot of red flags at the time. There were a few very lonely journalists who had the story 100% correct, that this was all, the weapons of mass destruction stuff was complete bullshit. And if anyone had had any curiosity at the time, you know, there were also plenty of young people like myself in college who thought, this is bullshit, and this is not a remote justification for, you know, this upending of the entire world in this massive war that you're getting us into, which, you know, more than 20 years later, we're still dealing with the aftermath of. So it's kind of astonishing to me, honestly, Saagar, that, I mean, #1, just the dishonesty of Kerry, but Like, why do you feel the need to defend Bush at this point?
Well, because it's about, it's not about Bush. And
it
this is the
reflects
thing.
on him.
It's about him. Yeah, it's like, you
that's
voted
right.
for it, dude. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ultimate problem. I mean, like you referenced, look, I was 11 years old whenever the U.S. invaded Iraq, and even I remember the day. I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember the newspaper. I remember the teacher, social studies teacher, and I was, shit stirrer even at that time. And I said, wasn't this about bin Laden? And she was like, well, according to the president, Saddam was supporting bin Laden. And I was like, but what about weapons of mass destruction? I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And everybody's just giving me a very nasty look. I'm from a hometown where George H.W. Bush has his library. So the Bush family are like gods, or they were at that time, where I was. And it didn't take a genius to figure it out.
Yeah.
It was, you don't have to be as smart. You don't have to be smart to think, oh, this whole smoking gun is mushroom cloud based on yellow cake and fake intel around Al-Qaeda. Like, this doesn't add up. It seems fishy. And, a lot of people had questions secretly at the time. They just didn't voice them.
There were also a lot of people who said, you know what, even if it's true.
Yeah, even if it's true, not worth
it. I also think it's worth reflecting just for a minute on the decision was made after Bush is, out of office and Democrats are in charge, and there was an opportunity of like, maybe we should investigate what happened here. Maybe there should be charges against the, most preeminent war criminals who brought us to this catastrophe, and Bush in particular. And the decision was made that for the good of the country and the healing and bringing together of the country, that there should be no elite accountability for those things. And it was the easier path at the time. It definitely, probably smoothed the transition into democratic power, et cetera. But I think it left a real lasting damage on the body politic, because it just showed that even the most brazen of lies and criminality, if you had the right amount of power and you had the right friends, or enough powerful people were sort of complicit with you, which was the real problem for them, you're going to get away with it. And so even as we, look at like the Trump indictments now and the charges that he's facing for actual real criminality that I think he more than deserves, we may have been in a better position to convince more than half the country that holding elites accountable for their crimes is the thing to do if we had, gone after the Bush era people, gone after other American presidents who arguably committed worse crimes, certainly, than, holding onto classified documents.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Krystal. All right, guys, we'll see you later.
Hey, guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.